This is, I think, why having a concrete definition of transgenderism and gender dysphoria, having a concrete definition is essential because only then can you then say that person doesn't actually have gender dysphoria or that person's not really trans. But because the definitions for both of those things are so broad, I think pretty much anybody could fit the bill if they just word it correctly.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the LGB Alliance USA News Roundup for the week ending on October 6th, 2025. We are here with Sylvia and me, Arianne. First, a summary of the news. The FBI cuts ties to the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Athena Forum launches in Europe to confront gender identity in public policy. Dr. Johanna Olson-Kennedy switches from LA Children's Hospital to Presidio Care Center in Pasadena. An openly gay Republican candidate for Virginia's lieutenant governor race, John Reed, is embroiled in a Tumblr controversy. And the U.S. Department of Justice subpoenas doctors and clinics involved in pediatric transition, but not without roadblocks. And we'll start with the news from the FBI. On Friday, October 3rd, the FBI announced that it cut ties with the Southern Poverty Law Center, or the SPLC. FBI Director Kash Patel said in a statement to the Daily Signal, quote, "The Southern Poverty Law Center long ago abandoned civil rights work and turned into a partisan smear machine. Their so-called hate map has been used to defame mainstream Americans and even inspire violence. That disgraceful record makes them unfit for any FBI partnership." Unquote. Kash Patel, who is himself of Hindu background, has previously criticized the SPLC as being anti-Christian, at least in part for including traditionalist Catholic groups on their hate group list, and told the Daily Signal, quote, "In April, during our anti-Christian bias panel, I made it clear that the FBI will never rely on politicized or agenda-driven intelligence from outside groups, and certainly not from the SPLC. Under this FBI, all ties with the SPLC have officially been terminated." Unquote. This decision also comes in the aftermath of the Charlie Kirk assassination. The SPLC had included Charlie Kirk's Turning Point organization in its This Year in Hate and Extremism 2024 report. By severing ties with the SPLC, the FBI will no longer use the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list. So what's the backstory of the SPLC and why should we at LGB Alliance USA care? The SPLC was founded in 1971 in order to help victims of Ku Klux Klan violence and continue the work of the civil rights movement. However, it began to move towards fighting right-wing extremism more broadly, or what it considers right-wing extremism at any rate. Sounds good? Well, not so fast. As a lot of us can testify, the term right-wing extremism has become increasingly watered down to mean anything that doesn't squarely fit within the purview of a specific modern progressive cultural warrior agenda. That means critics of gender ideology can be classified as far-right or transphobic by the likes of the SPLC. Now, this is relevant to LGB people because the SPLC has a history of demonizing critics of gender ideology from within the LGB community. For example, it classified Gays Against Groomers as a hate group, saying, quote, "Gays Against Groomers is a chapter-based organization that amplifies dehumanizing anti-trans rhetoric, perpetuates anti-LGBTQ plus stereotypes by falsely claiming that LGBTQ plus supporters of trans rights are dangerous to society," unquote. SPLC's influence is far-reaching, going beyond the boundaries of the American organization itself. Two SPLC members would go on to found another organization, the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, which enforces its groupthink all over the world. Of relevance to us is that it put LGB Alliance Australia and LGB Alliance Ireland on their list of far-right extremist groups. And given that the track record of the SPLC and its global spin-off groups isn't so great, we at LGB Alliance USA always suspected that it was only a matter of time before we too would be included on their hit list. So anything that distances the SPLC from national law enforcement is a good thing. But that's only this administration, and it could be very well the case that a more democratic administration will bring back their collaboration with the SPLC in the future. That's why it's important for us to send the message to both the right and the left that fighting gender ideology is not a partisan issue, and the federal government should not be empowering wealthy so-called nonprofits like the SPLC to silence critics of gender ideology as far right. And we should make it loud and clear that LGB is not the same as TQ+, and that groups like the SPLC should not be empowered to decide what is right and wrong think for lesbians, gays, and bisexuals. And we have some more good news, this time coming out of Europe. October 3rd marked the launch of the Athena Forum. The Athena Forum aims to counteract influences within the European Union and the Council of Europe, which have pushed gender identity in policy without public comment. As the Athena Forum explains on their website, quote, "In the European Union and the Council of Europe, policies are being rewritten in ways that obscure sex as a legal and material reality. Rather than through legislation, these shifts advance via guidelines, recommendations, strategies, and other soft law instruments that reshape norms without public debate. This has enabled the rapid
spread of gender identity frameworks
into a wide array of sectors, from employment and education to healthcare and social services, anti-discrimination, sports, civil society funding, and the collection of data and statistics, as well as the training of judicial, law enforcement, administrative, and equality bodies. Democratic processes are undermined. Human rights are redefined. Free speech is curtailed. Women's single-sex spaces disappear. The rights of lesbians and gay men are eroded. Children and adolescents are denied age-appropriate care and protection. Education is captured by ideology. Data on women's health and sex-based violence become unreliable. Fair competition in sports collapses. Healthcare is compromised. Core statistics are distorted. We believe it is time to respond. That is why we set up Athena Forum, a European initiative for sex-based rights, democratic values, and political courage." Unquote. The Athena Forum released a 22-page document called "Beneath the Surface: How Gender Identity is Reshaping Europe," which further elaborates on what's going wrong in Europe in regards to gender obscuring sex. Its director is Faika El-Nagashi, who is a lesbian political scientist originally born in Hungary and based in Austria. She was involved with the Green Party in Vienna, but left over the party's embrace of pro-gender identity policies. She sounds like an amazing woman, and we'll include a link to her Substack and Twitter, as well as the Athena Forum's website, in case you'd like to learn more or donate. As El-Nagashi states, they have no big donors, no European Commission funding, and no national government grants. So overall, it sounds like a very worthy project to support. And now for some medical news from California. On October 1st, Benjamin Ryan reported that Johanna Olson-Kennedy, the infamous gender doctor who pushes pediatric transition, has left Children's Hospital Los Angeles. While this initially came as a relief to opponents of pediatric gender medicalization, Ryan later clarified that Olson-Kennedy is now listed on the roster of the Gender Confirmation Center. Specifically, she is now working at the Procilio Care Center in Pasadena, part of the Gender Confirmation Center network. Of note is the fact that the front page of the Gender Confirmation Center website explicitly says that it does not offer care to adolescents. Perhaps this is due to the threats of subpoenas coming from the Trump administration regarding pediatric gender care, and we'll discuss that issue at the end of this news segment. And with that, I'll hand it to you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Arianne. JRD is a Tumblr account that's posted, wait for it, gay, racist, not safe for work content. JRD also happens to be the social media handles for John Reed, the GOP candidate for lieutenant governor in Virginia. John Reed has now found himself in a firestorm of accusations by Virginia Democrats, who claim that the racist Tumblr account is linked to the lieutenant governor hopeful, despite not having presented any evidence to support their accusation. Reed denies any connection to the Tumblr account, stating, quote, "This is extortion and it's illegal in Virginia," end quote. He also stated that he, quote, "has engaged legal counsel to pursue all options against these people." Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin urged Reed to withdraw from the race, calling the allegations a, quote, "distraction from campaigns," and, quote, "distraction from people paying attention to the most important issues," end quote. The governor has since rescinded his request for Reed to withdraw and has even endorsed Reed's run for lieutenant governor. John Reed is the first ever openly gay candidate of any political party that has run for statewide office in Virginia. Despite this, Equality Virginia, the state's largest LGBTQ+ org, has endorsed Reed's Democrat opponent, Senator Ghazala Hashmi. This may be because Reed has raised some eyebrows for his alleged anti-trans views and his suggesting that he would not cast the tie-breaking vote to enshrine same-sex marriage into law in the state of Virginia. In a clarifying statement, Reed explains that the proposed amendment to protect same-sex marriage, quote, "doesn't provide protection for people who sincerely don't agree with gay marriage. I mean, I'm running to be lieutenant governor, not to be someone's pastor, but I've got to protect everybody's rights." Will John Reed make history as the first homosexual lieutenant governor of Virginia, leading with nuance and stereotype breaking? Or will he be tumbled down by the gay, racist, Nazi, corn Tumblr blog? We will have to wait and see. Finally, the United States Department of Justice recently subpoenaed over 20 doctors and clinics that were found to be performing medical gender transition of minors. The investigation includes allegations of healthcare fraud, false statements, and more. In a statement, Attorney General Pam Bondi says, quote, "medical professionals and organizations that mutilated children in the service of a warped ideology will be held accountable by this Department of Justice," end quote. Boston's Children's Hospital is one example of a medical establishment that received a subpoena. This particular subpoena sought personal files for approximately 2,000 employees and contained 15 requests seeking information such as billing records, consent forms, information related to puberty blockers and hormones, and, controversially, information containing specific personal information of those who received gender-affirming care. The federal court in Massachusetts blocked that particular subpoena, claiming the DOJ failed to provide a legitimate investigative purpose. Furthermore, arguing that, quote, "the DOJ cannot broadly investigate a hospital for providing gender-affirming care to advance its goal of ending the practice. Instead, any investigation must be tied to a healthcare fraud offense, which is what the statute authorizing the subpoena calls for," end quote. This decision by the Massachusetts court will most likely serve as a blueprint for the 20+ other subpoenas handed out by the DOJ. So, Arianne, what do you make of the Massachusetts court blocking the federal subpoena? And do you agree, or are they in good faith, bad faith?
Well, thank you for explaining this issue, Sylvia. I had only really heard 20 subpoenas or over 20 subpoenas issued, and my initial reaction was, yay, that's very good. And I didn't really think of some of the legal technicalities that could be involved in this. I'm not a legal expert by any means, but based on the way you explained it, It does sound like there is a problem here with the way that the subpoenas were handled. I mean, it's true. I think the Massachusetts court is right. You shouldn't serve a subpoena for the purpose of advancing a particular policy aim, even if it's a policy aim that I think is noble and I agree with. It has to be the other way around. You have to look at the specific legal law breaking, in this case, medical fraud first, and serve the subpoena on those grounds, on those very precise grounds. And if the Department of Justice didn't do that, it's perfectly fair to call them out for that and block it.
I agree. And I think that if the DOJ is assuming that there is fraud, let's say that there has been a child or tween or teen, what have you, that was transitioned wrongfully, that was provided hormone surgery when they did not meet the qualifiers for being trans or didn't go through all of the safeguards. I'm assuming that that's what the DOJ is looking for, or what the DOJ is assuming is happening when they say healthcare fraud, but they did not provide any evidence of that happening when they subpoenaed the hospitals. So unless there perhaps is some detransitioned person out there who willingly gives the DOJ their medical records and says, see, look, I did not go through the safeguarding, or I was wrongfully transitioned, and I have reason to believe that this hospital is continuing to do that, and here's my proof of that happening, then the government would have a legal foundation for saying, we're going to subpoena you, give us your records, let's make sure that you're not committing fraud. But that's not what they did. So whether you agree or not with the policy of transitioning minors, you have to understand that we have laws for a reason, and you can't just subpoena someone because hearsay, or they're doing a practice perhaps that you don't like. Furthermore, it also brings up an interesting question. Does the government have the right to our medical records? There's another case, I'm not sure in which state, that's my bad, where a couple of families along with the hospital are fighting back against this subpoena, saying we don't, you, the government, don't have a right to our child's medical history. Doctors take the Hippocratic Oath, and they would be breaking it by providing that medical information. And I personally wouldn't want the government to have access to my records, just, because invasion of privacy. So it's also, that's another interesting angle to this subpoena situation.
Indeed, that is interesting. I think because I'm so used to hearing detransitioner narratives, when I first heard about the 20 subpoenas, my gut reaction is to go, oh, maybe these were detransitioners who regretted their care, but it sounds like that's not the case. It sounds like the patients themselves are not the ones who have initiated this claim, that it's the federal government that is using certain patients to advance their claim, even if the patients themselves are not on board. And I agree that that's starting to get into kind of a dodgy territory there. And I don't know what, for cases like this, like, I mean, there have been, all sorts of medical scandals that have happened with tobacco companies, lawsuits, and I always just assume that they're patients who feel like they've been in some way wronged. Medical malpractice cases, I've only ever heard of it like patients feeling like they were wronged. And there could be a class action suit where like some specific people initiate on behalf of a larger group. But I don't know how sound this is for the federal government.
Just to bounce off your class action lawsuit, I then also wonder about the statute of limitations, and how long does a person have prior to their gender transition as a minor before you can't bring a lawsuit about that, which is why I'm very invested in watching Chloe Cole's case against Kaiser Permanente, not so Permanente. Anyway, inside joke for anyone who's watched our previous news coverage of that story. But yeah, I'm not sure if the DOJ will appeal the court's decision or if they will go back and rewrite the subpoena to be more specific or provide the evidence that was lacking as far as healthcare fraud taking place. Right now, they've done neither of those things, which then makes me wonder, are the subpoenas more of just a symbolic thing to make it look like they're trying to stop gender transition of minors, or do they not really know what they're doing? It's hard to say.
Something that's just popped into my head now, it was in one of the cases, I think it was at the whistleblower case. It was in Texas or something, where it was not just about defrauding the patient.
It was about
defrauding the state Medicaid services. It was saying something like Texas law banned Medicaid payments for transition, and there was evidence that people were doing it anyway by like using dodgy endocrine disorder diagnoses as sort of a back channel. I could see that being a way the government could pursue a fraud case that does not actually directly involve the patient's consent. It would be about defrauding the government or an insurance company or something. I don't know how that would fit in with the case. You said it was a Massachusetts court, but was the actual subpoena they blocked?
For Boston Hospital.
I would assume Massachusetts Medicaid covers this, like it covers pediatric transition or at least allows it. So I'm not sure how that would work in that case, but I'm just trying to steelman what would be a possible route for the government to pursue a legal case without the patients initiating it. And it could be something like that.
And this is, I think, why having a concrete definition of transgenderism and gender dysphoria, having a concrete definition is essential, because only then can you then say that person doesn't actually have gender dysphoria or that person's not really trans. But because the definitions for both of those things are so broad, I think pretty much anybody could fit the bill if they just word it correctly. I don't know if the government needs to have like a standard of this is what it means to be trans, this is the definition of gender dysphoria, and then they could maybe say there's evidence to suggest you're misdiagnosing people who don't actually have gender dysphoria. But again, you need evidence of that taking place for the subpoena. And it seems as though they're never going to get that sort of evidence without access to the documents, which they can't get without a subpoena. So it's just kind of like this loop-de-loop of, yeah. But let us know your thoughts in the comments if you have an idea of how to get a subpoena to go through, or if you think it's just a waste of time, and if there's something the government, the DOJ, could focus their time on better. Let us know.
Thank you everyone for watching. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Goodbye.